Hello there, welcome back to the booth here at the Mythic Championship 1 from Cleveland. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon, and in the feature match area, the intensity now gets ratcheted up twofold. This round and next round is where we're going to decide who's in our top 8. There's people going to get eliminated and people that are going to have their dream come true of finally make it into a Mythic Championship top 8. Right now, in the feature match area, we have Reid Duke at 12-2 in prime position for that top 8. His opponent, Daniel Gräfensteiner, is actually on 11-3, so in kind of a different position and really fighting for his tournament life. The players are ready. Let's head down. It's time for round number 15 here from Cleveland. Hello and welcome back to coverage of Mythic Championship 1 from Cleveland. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Paul Cheon. It is that time, Paul. This is the good stuff. We're down the stretch here on day number 2. Round 15 is upon us, where we have in the feature match area Reid Duke from the United States on mono blue tempo. He plays for Team Ultimate Guard, and he is 12-2. Now, I mention this for two reasons. One, he's on the verge of a top 8 with a win this round, but also because his opponent, Daniel Gräfensteiner from Germany, is on 11-3. What does this mean as far as implications for these players' top 8 hopes?
Well, for Daniel, it is basically, if he doesn't win this round, he is effectively eliminated from top 8 contention. However, with Reid, he has a loss to give. Even if he loses this round, there is still a chance, for example, that he can either draw or win the last round to make it into the top 8. So Reid has a little more breathing room. Of course, he wants to lock it in by winning this round. Okay. But however, for Daniel, this is very, very crucial. He needs to win this, or he is effectively out of top 8 contention.
Now we've got a matchup that is actually a really cool one. We've got an actual control deck here. Daniel Gräfensteiner has sleeved up Esper control, and as we've seen a lot this weekend, mono blue tempo is kind of everywhere, and Reid Duke is championing it right now with that really great record.
Right, and you know, the mono blue deck is the type of deck that's really thrived against some of the slower decks in the format, right? Because it has access to counter magic, because it has ways to protect you know, cards that you put Curious Obsession on with cards like Dive Down and Spell Pierce. But this is slightly different, right? Reid's deck really kind of shined against the Wilderness Reclamation Nexus of Fate deck that we saw earlier. But how will it fare against a deck with a ton of removal and disruption? Because he did lose in day 1 against Rob Pisano, who was playing Esper Control.
Yeah, this is really interesting stuff to watch unfold. And look at that, Reid Duke protecting himself by sacrificing that Siren Storm Tamer. He's going to give up his onboard position. Well, now we kind of know why, right? To protect this flyer.
Right, and Daniel definitely needs to have a way to deal with this Tempest Djinn. And
Cast down, maybe?
Cast down would work, but he doesn't have it. He's got a Mortify, and he has a Vraska's Contempt, but he doesn't have a 4th mana source or a white source to deal with the Tempest Djinn. And now Reid's got to be feeling great because he is now untapping with the Tempest Djinn. Does he have a way to protect the Tempest Djinn? And he does have a Spell Pierce.
That's right. And, you know, cheap ways to protect your threats are kind of the name of the game for this mono blue tempo deck. They have Spell Pierce, they have Dive Down, they have ways to protect these cards. Now, this Spell Pierce will buy him a lot of time because even if Daniel finds that 4th land so that he can, I'll stop that line of thinking because he just passed a turn back ball.
Wow.
No 4th land, no white mana source.
And Reid is leaning very heavily on this Tempest Djinn to close out the game because Reid is also kind of out of gas. He does have the Spell Pierce, but that's it.
Yeah, he's flooding a little bit, especially for this deck that only runs 20 lands. They're all basic islands.
And Essence Capture is a completely dead draw in this matchup, as Daniel's version of the Esper Control deck plays 0 creatures.
Wow, just straight up 0. Okay.
His win condition is 1 copy of Kaya Orzhov Usurper.
What about Teferi?
And Teferi.
Okay, he can do that game too.
He can do the Teferi thing.
I was going to say, we're going to be here for a while, Paul.
I'm kind of hoping that Kaya is the way that the game gets closed out.
Yeah, it's much quicker that way. Right. This Tempest Djinn, though, has grown. It is lethal next turn, and Reid Duke, has he just locked it up here? There's really not much
he's
that
got
you can do.
He's got a Spell Pierce here, so he can Spell Pierce pretty much anything.
There it is, the Glacial Fortress, just a turn late for Daniel. He's going to have to just fire off the Mortify It's not going to work. Reid is going to spell pierce it, and we're going to be into game 2.
Right. I mean,
wow, Reid has to feel like he got away with one here. This was not a particularly strong draw. Look at the spells he's played. Sure, he's got one of his most potent spells with Tempest Djinn. Otherwise, it was a Storm Tamer and an Opt.
and he's just like, you have it, you have it.
Oh, and he also found himself an additional counter spell. Reid shows it to him, and Daniel Gräfensteiner scoops up his permanence, and that was game 1 going to Reid Duke. Now, we're going to start consulting sideboards here, Paul. I want you to take a look at those so that when we get back from our break, we can chat about them. But boy, this is really going to highlight the difference between having access to 3 colors of sideboard cards versus just 1, where Reid's game plan is much more narrow, and he's not going to have as much options as far as that goes. All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, though, we'll have more live Magic from round 15 here in Cleveland. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to the feature match area here in Cleveland. We're here for the first Mythic Championship. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon, and it is our great pleasure to bring you coverage of Standard down the stretch here, round number 15. Let's take a live look in at Yoshihiko Okawa versus Paul Reitzel. These players are sitting with 3 losses on their record, 11-3, so very much playing for their tournament life here. And where are we at on this board state? Let's see. So there's a Karn and a Search for Azcanta doing good things here for Okawa, but what is Paul up to on his side?
Paul's got a Detention Mage, which has removed a Teferi, which is probably not going to stay there for too long. Oh, and a second Detention Mage.
Yeah, Deputy of Detention's taking care of 2 Planeswalkers. Boy, this gives me the nerves here about the potential for a sweeper.
Right, but the Search for Azcanta is about to be flipped. It looks like there's enough cards for Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. And, you know, I was going to say that things are looking good for Okawa, given that he's still at 16 life, and we're well past turn 4 or 5 of the game. And with Azcanta the Sunken Ruin on the battlefield, there's a good chance Yoshihiko can now activate it to find a removal effect for one of the Deputy of Detentions on the battlefield. And he found a Mortify. And given that this is game 1, probably?
It is. It's
okay.
game 1. Yep.
Right. Given that it's game 1, he also doesn't need to really worry about something like a Spell Pierce or a Negate, because that's the type of card that you'd expect these Azorius aggro decks to bring in after sideboard.
Yeah, effectively mono 1 game 1.
Right.
Mono white
however,
outside of the Deputy.
However, the permanents that have been exiled are both Planeswalkers, so he would be more incentivized to do it on his turn so he can get the value of actually activating the Planeswalkers.
He could chain these two things together. Paul currently doesn't have any power on his side of the battlefield at all, and that's exactly what he's going to do.
Right. Keep in mind, Snubborn Sentry's in play, but Paul is nowhere near close to being ascended here. He's only got 5 permanents in play.
Right, miles away. Of course, the Legion's landing doesn't do any attacking or blocking on its own, so 0 power on the battlefield, although Okawa's going to play it a little safe here and make a Karnstruct, as we say.
Yeah. He chose to make a token here because there is the chance that Paul Reitzel does play a Benolosh Marshal, and if he does, then the Snubhorn Sentry would have enough power to attack and kill the Teferi. Oh, and there it is.
Hey, look at that. The Benolosh Marshal even shows up.
And
Okawa says, look how smart I am.
Yeah, very, very heads-up play from Okawa.
Much rather have Karn with a little bit less loyalty, but get to keep Teferi on the battlefield, so well played.
And it looks like there's a cast down also exiled from the Karn, which Okawa can choose to get, because I believe that die is representing a silver counter.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
But first, let's see what's going on in the hand here for Reitzel. Wow, he's got some nice stuff. Another Benolosh Marshal in the history of Benalia.
Yeah, but this is kind of close to the point where the writing is kind of on the wall, and the game is very close to just being over here. Okawa has 2 Planeswalkers in play and an Escanta the Sunken Ruin, along with access to a ton of removal spells.
Even a lot of mana available.
Right.
Drawing minimum 2 cards per turn thanks to Teferi from this point forward as well.
Yeah, and also perfect information with that Thought Erasure.
Looks like he decided to just Thought Erase both cards away in the end.
Yeah, Yoshihiko Okawa basically has the world right now. Just has it all.
Now he's got cast down for the Benolosh Marshal that is still on the battlefield. And he has effectively cleared away all relevant permanents at this point. By the way, that sleeve that you see in the middle of Okawa's land, that's a transformed Search for Escanta. He's using that kind of as a way to remember, to put it back properly. Now, a little bit of a fight back here for Paul Reitzel. He finds off the top of his library another Benolosh Marshal, which does let him get in with the Snubhorn Sentry for a single point of damage. But unfortunately for Paul, it's not enough to actually kill Teferi, just knock 1 loyalty off. And Paul has seen enough. He's going to scoop up his permanents, and that is game 1 going to Yoshihiko Okawa.
Interesting card, too. That was the Eldest Reborn, which is not often a card that you see in the main deck of these Esper control decks.
Mm-hmm. It might not stay there either.
Right. It's a little on the slower side.
Yeah, they play a Legion's Landing, and you're like, well.
What am I doing? Yeah.
What have I done with my life might be the question at that point. Right. All right, game number 2 underway here on our main table. This is Reid Duke versus Daniel Gräfensteiner. And our players, well, they're underway. Reid with a pretty smooth victory off of a minor mana stumble there for Daniel. Maximum punishment, though, with Tempest Gen, his hardest hitting card from Reid. He had the minimum number of things to protect it. Didn't need anything else. And he won game 1. Now the real fight begins, though. Daniel's going to be on the play. No 1-drop here from Reid. Pretty common to see this deck play a 1-drop most of the time game 1, but in game 2 sometimes Reid will change his configuration around and it will be less focused on those type of cards.
I will say this, just taking a look at Daniel's sideboard, he can potentially bring in all 15 cards out of his sideboard in this matchup.
Wow, just transform his whole deck.
Right, because cards like Cry of the Carnarium and even cards like Kaya's Wrath, a little bit on the slower side, not the best. And I think if he just sideboards into a more proactive strategy involving Duresses, Thought Erasures, and Thief of Sanity, that's his best course to victory. And so after sideboard, I really like Daniel's side in this matchup. You get to basically upgrade all of those kind of clunky 3 and 4 mana cards for cards like, again, the Duress, Thief of Sanity, Hostage Taker, Lyra. There's just a lot of great cards for the matchup.
Is there anything fundamental to his game plan that he really can't take out of the main deck, or is this deck pretty malleable?
Honestly, I'm looking here. After sideboard, I guess he could take something like a Kaya out. But for example, Kaya's Wrath, given that Reid's deck plays cards like Spell Pierce, you can't really lean heavily on 4 or 5 mana non-creature spells to actually get the job done. So I can see him looking at those cards first in terms of choosing like which spells to kind of shave from the deck.
All right, so Daniel used Duress there to take away Curious Obsession from Reid's hand. Reid did flash in the 2-mana Merfolk Trickster on end step, so he can start getting the damage flowing. And look at this, a nice follow-up. He's really kind of demanding already a removal spell or two for Daniel with a sweeper. Even better, as Reid is currently tapped out.
Right. If Daniel did, in fact, board out the sweepers, he is going to be in some trouble. He does need to find a removal spell for the Tempest Djinn. He does have access to lots of removal, but it doesn't look like he has any currently in hand.
What else is there? Oh, card draw, right. Yeah, this is a tough spot because that first duress looked pretty good. It let Daniel see what was going on and took away a Curious Obsession. The second duress, well, it could clear the way for something down the line, but he doesn't have that something just yet, and he's going to be taking a ton of damage in between. Yeah. There's a Thief of Sanity from the sideboard. That doesn't look super hot here either, though.
Daniel's going to be having some nightmares about these Tempest Djinns because you're playing a deck that just has 3 to 4 cast downs with 3 to 4 mortifies, and he just hasn't really been able to either draw them or find the mana to cast those cards.
How good is Thief of Sanity here?
Well,
I mean, Reid has to respect it, right?
Yeah, Thief of Sanity is certainly strong. Reid does have the Tempest Djinn in play.
Yeah.
So if Reid, for example, I don't
not attacking? You're not suggesting that, are you?
Well, it is certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
I could see a world where Reid, for example, plays out the Tempest Djinn here and also just play the Siren Storm Tamer. If, for example, you think that Daniel is very likely to have brought out the Kaya's Wraths, just playing out more pressure on the board and then being able to untap with counter magic makes sense.
Also, Daniel had the opportunity to play Kaya's Wrath last turn and didn't. Now, we know he didn't have it in his hand, but from Reid's perspective, he may be looking at it and trying to come up with the proper read of the situation. He's decided to take the middle ground, leaving up Wizard's Retort and the ability to activate the Siren Storm Tamer rather than running out the second Tempest Djinn.
Right, because now Reid's game plan here by doing this is basically saying, look, you can Thief of Sanity if you want, right? You're going to get a card, but I now have 2 ways to protect this Tempest Djinn on the battlefield. I have the Wizard's Retort, and I have the Siren Storm Tamer to be able to protect my Tempest Djinn. And, given that Daniel didn't cast a removal spell on the Tempest Djinn last turn, it seems extremely, there's just no way that Daniel can actually piece together two ways to kill that Tempest Djinn. So
and he's not finding any removal from Reid's deck.
Right, exactly. Sure. Reid's just going to take it here.
Yeah, there's a lot of cards actually in Reid's deck that just don't do a whole lot in the hands of Daniel Gräfensteiner. He's like, oh, I found a dive down. Well, okay, good luck with that, right?
Yeah, and it looks like he found an Opt.
Okay, that's a card. Okay. Though he has a better version of it with Chemister's Insight if all he wants to do is draw cards.
Yeah, but Reid firmly in the driver's seat here. He's got 2 Wizard's Retorts in hand with that Tempest Djinn, and this is a serious clock. Daniel's on a 2-turn clock.
Man, if Reid could win this thing and secure this top 8, he's going to want to hang on to those Tempest Djinns. Those are they have been granting many wishes today, no doubt about that. Okay. Opt.
Right, looking for
removal, I suppose. Yeah.
Removal. He is aware of the Wizard's Retort in Reid's hand, right? Because he did cast the Duress. Oh, and he kept on top. That was a Mortify. And he does have a Duress, so he can set it up where he goes Duress into Mortify. Reid can then choose to counter the Duress if he so chose with the Storm Tamer, or just let Daniel take one of the Retorts because he has 2 in his hand. Which is, I think, what I would do. But whatever Reid does is probably the correct thing.
Yeah. The card that comes to mind, oh, he's just going to pass the turn back.
Okay.
Good patience here from Gräfensteiner, but his life total will pay dearly for that patience. Redraws his card for the turn.
Yeah, land is not the worst draw.
No, remember, it's pumping up that Djinn every turn, too. I don't know if it actually changes the clock, but every point of damage can matter. There's Mortify, and we'll see if Reid goes for the mana-efficient play by using the Storm Tamer, or if he just uses one of his 2 Wizard's Retorts, he can actually cast both.
Right. If he uses the Wizard's Retort here, he's going to get in for 8 damage. That's going to take Daniel down to 4. And then Reid still has Storm Tamer plus Retort as protection for the Tempest Djinn.
This is not a lethal attack from Reid, but he is setting up a 2-turn clock. It's an attack for 7 to knock Daniel Gräfensteiner down to 5. I almost said that in German, Paul. He's got a very German last name. He is from Germany.
He does. He does. So Daniel desperately looking for a removal spell, but I don't think it's going to get it done, right? Because
like, what could he find? He needs to have.
Well, he has a
duress removal spell. Is that?
That's what he needs. Although to be fair,
he could chomp.
He can keep the Thief of Sanity back as a blocker.
Right. Buy him a turn. Oh, it's a tough sequence of cards to find, regardless. All right. So here's the first test for Reid. A duress goes on the stack, and Reid could look at his hand and just say, "Well, if you're going to get it anyway, I'm not going to counter it and not bother using the mana." Or he can say, I want to protect the knowledge of what else might be in my hand, and since you're going to get it anyway, I'll just pay the mana. That's what he did.
That was a good draw, though. That was a hostage taker, and this is going to force Reid Duke to use the other Wizard's Retort. So now he can chump block the Tempest Djinn, and then he will get another turn to find an answer for the Tempest Djinn. But keep in mind, Reid has a second Tempest Djinn in his hand.
That's right. Reid needs a Trickster, although looks like he didn't have it. So that is Daniel Gräfensteiner going down all the way to 3 life. This is it. This is the turn. He needs to find an answer. He's got Search for his content to help him. Ooh, is he keeping it? No, he's putting that in the bin. It was Thought Erasure. He's going to transform, and this is going to be it. He's going to either find it off the draw step, or if he can use the Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. That was a land, Paul. Okay,
so keep in mind, he does have access to multiple copies of Cast Down and Mortify in his deck. So he can still go ahead here and activate Azcanta the Sunken Ruin and find one of those removal spells. And if he does find it and Reid doesn't have a way to stop it, Daniel still survives for one more turn, because he will go down to 1.
That's right. Reid deciding to play around the sweeper. He did not end up casting the other.
And that's it.
And that's going to do it. He extends the hand, and you just saw Reid Duke secure a top 8 here at Mythic Championship #1 in Cleveland. Congratulations to Reid. He does still have to sort out the tiebreakers and everything. We do have 499 players in the field, which is a bit more than your average premier level event like this. But still, he should be good with only 2 losses on his record. Reid should be in the top 8.
Right. I mean, you just saw, like, if a Tempest Djinn is just left unchecked, it will just completely end the game in very, very short order. And Reid's hand was perfect there. He had the Storm Tamer and multiple counterspells, and his game plan was protect my 3-mana gigantic flyer.
We're going to pop back in here on the Paul Reitzel versus Okawa match that we checked in on a little bit earlier. I do have another update for Luis Scott Vargas fans out there. He was in the feature match area here at 11-3, playing against Chicheng Ye, who was also on 11-3. They're done with a 3-game match. Luis Scott Vargas won 2 games to 1, and he is now 12-3. He's close.
Wow.
Got to see what his
is he going to run
is,
it back?
I don't
know.
Tiebreaker math will come into play on the next round for Luis, but he is tantalizingly close to yet another top 8 for him. That would be number 10. Let's check in here, though. Wow, 20-2.
Yeah, 20-2.
But what is Paul's board right now? He has 0 power.
Yeah, there's a Snubborn Sentry in play with 9 permanents on the battlefield. So if Paul plays anything whatsoever, the Snubborn Sentry will be lethal. But of course, there's a Teferi in play, and Yoshihiko has several cards in hand.
Right, this is the control player having wrestled control from Paul Reitzel from what looks like a blistering start. Look at that graveyard. You see some Benalish Marshals, some history of Benalias in there. And is Okawa fully stable now? It looks like it from here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a cast out in his hand as well. We're going to get a Teferi trigger that can also untap Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. He just finds a Kaya's Wrath on top of that.
He's activating.
And Paul has no cards in hand.
Yeah, he's just on empty. This is how it goes, right? Okay, well, he finds a Planeswalker off the top of the library. It's a Johnny. And Okawa says, hold on a second. I might respond.
Yeah, because if the Ajani resolves and Yoshihiko does nothing, Paul will The Snubhorn Sentry will become a 3/3.
Mm-hmm.
So he's killing it in response.
So this is to keep the city's blessing away.
Absolutely.
Sure, just for future city's blessings, although it won't actually matter on this board currently.
Right. But then Paul's now is probably going to be getting back a Tithe Taker because that lines up pretty well against spot removal spells. And even if Okawa played something like Akaya's Wrath, he would still be left with a Spirit token, which he could then pump for lethal with a Johnny on the following turn.
Okay, this is a lethal Tide Taker, so it must be answered.
However, Okawa also, I believe, has a Cry of the Carnarium.
Okay, which would mean that no afterlife.
Right.
Yeah, he also has Kaya's Wrath that he could use to clear out the Taker in combination with a spot removal spell of some sort. Mm-hmm. But Cry seems great.
Right, and that's the thing. If you look down at the life totals, one would think, okay, well, Okawa's at 2. What's going on here? Mm-hmm. But this is what happens when you play a control deck. You, like you mentioned earlier, you wrestle control of the game. You now have all the advantages. You have the mana advantage. You have the card advantage. You have a Planeswalker on the battlefield. You're just ahead on resources to the point where you're effectively locking your opponent out from doing anything relevant.
And this is actually a fairly stable position for Okawa as well. Normally you'd think, okay, I'm playing against an aggressive deck and I'm down to 2, I feel really nervous. This is a white-blue deck. Like, right. What are they going to do? Burn you out? Haste you out? None of those things apply here.
Exactly. That's always the fear when you play against the mono-red deck, for example, where any shock, any lightning strike will just get you, right? Yeah. Or they can even play it where they hold multiple shocks to play around counter magic and they get you. But that's just not the case with the mono-white decks.
Paul finds the Snubhorn Sentry. That's going to give him the city's blessing. But Paul, well, he's in one of the most miserable situations you can be as a professional or really any Magic player, which is you're on the white weenie aggro deck, and now you're facing down a very long slog towards almost inevitable loss.
Right.
It's not that he can't possibly win, but it just takes such an extremely rare set of circumstances to make it happen.
Right, but also at the same time, Paul is playing for a potential slot in the top 8. You just cannot concede.
You can't concede here. Even if he has 1%, he has to just play it out, even though really he's going to be standing here with his arms folded for the most of the rest of the game, because if he draws a card and can play it, he's probably just going to do so.
Right. Okawa, I think he'd be feeling a little bit better if you can find something like a Vraska's Contempt, just to get that Ajani off the battlefield. Right.
The ultimate on Ajani is concerning, though far away. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, you get 3 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink. And that is a problem. I mean, that's not something that Okawa is really equipped to deal with over and over and over again. But he's got a lot of time. The ultimate doesn't come until -7. What did you find? Oh,
he found Akaya.
Yep.
And this will end the game in short order. Not only that, this is going to stabilize. Not stabilize because he's already stabilized, but he's going to buy him some more life. Now he can use Kaya, +1, exile 2 cards from a single graveyard, gain 2 life for each creature card exiled this way.
If at least one creature was
exiled. If at least one creature was exiled this way. So every turn he's going to be gaining 2 life, getting ahead with Teferi, and then eventually ultimate Kaya for lethal damage.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll see them up, minus up. You can kind of do it however you see fit. Also, this is relevant, by the way, because it's giving Ajani fewer targets to get back with the minus ability, because Paul, I think, was going to try to go on this kind of track where he would like minus, plus, minus, like that, to at least create multiple threats and force Okawa to keep having answers. But I'll tell you what, the card I'm looking at the most right now is Search for Azcanta turned into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, because, yeah, Teferi's great, but this thing is, Azcanta the Sunken Ruin is really just finding any answer that Okawa could possibly want at this point, and it's so outpacing what Paul's doing. Right. And there it is getting activated again. So Venerated Loxodon was the play there for Reitzel. Well, that's a relative whiff here for Okawa.
Right. But keep in mind, Okawa does have a handful of Kaya's Wraths in hand as well, and this is a pretty reasonable spot to fire one off. It is kind of expensive, but Okawa can play this as safely as he chooses.
Yep, no cards for Reitzel, so he knows the way's clear. Kind of interesting, too, Paul. You look at the Legion's landing there for Reitzel. He must have drawn that late in the game, because he had quite a few creatures, it seems, with multiple History of Benalia, having, well, gotten Okawa down to 2 at one point in this game. Usually you can get that thing transformed, and this game would be super different if that was transformed.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, like, when people talk about this aggressive white deck, like what is the most important card? And oftentimes people will look at History Benalia or Benalish Marshall, but I recently actually just spoke with Marcio Carvalho, and he said that Legion's Landing is the best card in the deck.
Okay.
Because he said it's Llanowar Elf that also gives you a mana sink in the late game, and it also attacks.
Yeah, and it does all of those things. Unfortunately for Paul Reitzel, it just sat on the battlefield, and he's going to extend the hand as Okawa wins and puts himself in a good position. Again, we're not committing, right? We don't know that Okawa is going to be in the top 8, but he is now 12-3, and this is sort of the cutoff for where you need to be to make the top 8. But it will depend on how pairings go. One thing that can happen in the next round is Okawa could get paired up against somebody who has a worse record than he does and wants to play. And in that case, if Okawa plays and loses, he will not be in the top 8 anymore, and that's true for Luis or anybody else with that record.
Yeah, we saw that happen actually at the last Mythic Championship, where there were multiple people sitting at X and 3, and some of them just had to play it out. So we can certainly see that happen. And there was actually one incident where a player wanted to get better seeding that had a better record, and ultimately ended up actually dream crushing and winning and knocking somebody out who was thinking that all they needed to do was draw into the top 8.
Yeah, these things happen, right? I mean, there's nothing given until I read your name off of the sheet during the ceremony, because, people tend to think, okay, well, I've gotten to this point in the tournament and therefore I should be able to do X so that I can get in.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily work that way. Sometimes you get thrown a curveball and you always have to be in battle mode until the last round is completely over.
Right. You are never locked in until you sign that slip.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's what we're looking at here. We've got one more round of action to bring you here before we finish up for the day. This was round number 15. We've got round number 16 coming your way. And what we're going to do is try to bring you as much of round 15 as we can. Those matches actually went fairly quickly this time. So hopefully we're going to be able to get another match into the feature match area. But as we work our way down the stretch, I can tell you the tension level just goes up and up and up. When people come in off of the draft in the morning, there's some optimism, right? Maybe you had a good day overnight and you're like, okay, this could be my day. Let's get it going. How's my draft deck? But now it's nerves. We've even seen it affect some of the players in the feature match area, but it's hard to convey through the cameras. But, I do some work over in the feature match area in the other rounds, and I can tell you it is tense down there, and it really ramps up now and the next round.
Yeah, it's weird because, coming into the day, sometimes you tell yourself, all right, this is just like any other day.
Yeah,
I'm just playing magic.
One turn at a time.
It's just magic. But then all of a sudden these thoughts start entering your head because, I've been there before too, where it's like, okay, all right, just don't mess up, play your game, whatever. But in the back of your mind, you're like, I'm one win away from the top 8.
Yeah.
I just need to make sure. And then you're thinking, don't get mana screwed. And then you miss a land drop and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And all those things just start piling on. And, some people can crumble under all that pressure.
Absolutely. It's funny because if you talk to a lot of the pros, they'll make light of that. They'll say like, whatever, I'm taking my win percentage up against yours. And it's not about the mental fortitude of the game. It is a factor. It really is. I've seen it time and time again that people who wouldn't make a mistake do under different circumstances. And sure, maybe if you're in the Hall of Fame, it's not a big deal to you, but there's not that many people in the Hall of Fame, as it turns out.
What am I seeing right now?
You are seeing an outright assault by Joe So. Julien Berthaud is blocking with a pair of Tempest Djinns. And in fact, Joe is actually going to lose 2 creatures here, although with Judith on the battlefield, those will represent extra damage as well. But how is Julien surviving this? Wow.
Well, he was at 17. Now Judith can be sacrificed to deal the final point of damage to Tempest Djinn, but it looks like Julien has a dive down. And if this isn't lethal, Julien, does he have enough to attack back? No, it doesn't. It doesn't look like he does.
Yeah, maybe if the Terramander can get adapted, but there's only 2 cards, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not really seeing it.
And I think Joe's just going to run out the old 5-mana 4/4.
Whoa, Joe's down to 14.
Venerated Loxodon. So Joe's down to 14. If Julien plays a land,
that's 10, 11, 12.
That's 12 damage, and he only has 2 spells in graveyard.
Yeah.
So the Terramander is pretty far away.
He needs to go land double Curious Obsession. That's a tough sell.
That is pretty rough. So I don't think Julian's in a position to attack. Let's see. The Fairy Duelist is pretty nice here, and Julien does want to close this game out sooner than later because of cards like Judith that you saw. It's also very possible Joe has some burn, maybe they're lightning strikes, cards like that can kind of close out this game. Also, Julian does want to at least attack with one creature if possible because he has that Curious Obsession in play, and if you do not attack with any creatures, it will simply fall off.
Can Julian afford to do so? This looks like a very tough spot.
Right, so if he chooses to attack with the Pteramander, I mean, he has a handful of goodies. If he chooses to attack with the Pteramander, that would get Joe down to 12, and then if he finds just an island, he will have a lethal attack back with the Tempest Djinns if they do not trade with the Venerated Loxodons.
Yeah, let's not forget the Vicious Conquistador in the middle there as well. When that attack, each opponent loses 2 life. So Julian's actually down to 2 virtually here. Now, perhaps, let's just look at his hand. Oh, Fairy Duelist? So he could Entrancing, no. He could Storm Tamer, Mistcloaked Herald, and Duelist, though.
Right, so that would be basically 3 blockers. And he would also have the ability to drain, to shrink one of the attacking creatures as well, which would negate any of the creatures that you see on the middle of the screen, all with 2 power.
This is an extremely precarious position, though, for Julian.
And Joe has lots of great draws here.
Yeah, no cards in hand.
Right.
But
Judith would do it.
Judith is GG for sure. Okay, he is actually going to go for the Entrancing Melody because I spoke a little too soon. There was 1 token on the other side of the battlefield that he could steal and still have mana with that land drop that he hit for the Fairy Duelist. Wow, Julian Vertu, he's up a game, by the way. Let's not forget that. This is for the match, so Joe needs to find a way to kill him right now, or I think we're done here.
Yeah, so the Conquistador will get Julian down to 2, but Julian will then play Fairy Duelist, target one of the 2-power creatures, block Loxodon, block one of the 2/2s with the Tempest Djinn, and block the other Loxodon, and Julian will be able to survive unless Joe draws a removal spell.
Is that enough for lethal?
No, I think that might be
the
one
Lieutenant,
short.
wow, probably because Julian stole that Vampire. Because it's not pumping enough, right? It's only pumping 2 creatures on the battlefield. He attacks with everything, and now Julian is going to spring his trap.
I think Julian's going to go to 1 here.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right, because he's got to block the Loxodons. He's going to shrink one of the vampires and eat one of the vampires. And so the Dust Legion Zealot will be able to get in for it has 1 power for exactly 1 damage.
So close. Joe So is on the verge.
Wow.
And can't get there, and that's going to do it. Julian Berthaud finds the win. He needed every single bit of all of that to get the job done. It looked like an aggressive attack from our perspective, but he had all of his bases covered, even including Joe effectively adding 2 power worth of air quotes haste to the battlefield that turn.
Yeah, I would have loved to see more of Joe's deck, though. That looked really sweet. The
we have
3-color,
not seen a lot of that.
Yeah, a Mardu aggressive vampire strategy.
Right.
With Judith as well.
Yeah.
And he's made it far.
Vicious Conquistador, not the card I expected to see this weekend.
No.
But there he was attacking in, and this close. I mean, this close to getting the job done. Just 1 damage. And that's after he had Judith on the battlefield, where you always look back and go, could I have thrown 1 damage at my opponent somewhere?
Right. Or like, did I need to attack with Judith? I mean, there are all kinds of things, I'm sure, because we only came in right at the end there. So who knows what points of damage were missed. But I'm sure Joe will be stewing on that, because I know I have in the past where I'm just like, wow. I know I could have gotten in. I could have done it.
I know it. I just know it. I usually just believe myself and move on.
No, I played perfectly.
Yeah. No, that's not. I always say I punted. I'm sure. I don't know how.
Oh, I see.
All right. Well, we're going to take a short break. Then we're going to be back at the news desk, and Rich and Maria and company are going to be giving you all the updates from the tournament floor as we wind our way down and start gearing up for the last round of Swiss here from Cleveland. Don't you go anywhere.
Hello and welcome back to the News Desk. Maria and Rich here hanging out with you. And somebody on the floor with Brian David Marshall who is very, very happy, I'm sure, to have locked up a spot in the top 8.
Brian David Marshall here on the floor with Autumn Burchett. And Autumn, you're running out of space on your Twitter biography. Back-to-back national champion and Mythic Invitationalist. But now it looks like we have to add Mythic Championship top 8 competitor here at 13-2. What's been going on this weekend?
I didn't even know this was possible. I went with the deck I loved, and 19 islands have guided me. It's incredible. I am so... I can't wait to be on the Sunday stage for the first time. It's so ridiculous. I've been with my friends for like the last half hour, and like every few minutes I just like explode into like hugging one of them.
It's been a remarkable weekend. We talked on Thursday, and you compared this mono blue deck to a Delver deck. You compared it to a legacy deck.
I've never played a deck in Blue-White Delver was before my time. I've never played a deck in Standard that gives me the same feel as playing like my Delvers in Legacy. I love my Delvers.
Now, what has all of this meant for you? Like, I know you can't even use your phone right now. Every time you turn your phone on, you're just like kind of like inundated with messages. But what does getting a chance to play on the Sunday stage mean for you?
This is like the next step, right? You start just trying to like get a positive record at F&M, and then you start trying to like, win a local tournament or top 8 it, and like step by step you work your way up like the ladder of accomplishments. And I've wanted this one for like a few years now, and especially this year I've just really focused in on it. These last 6 months I've been trying so hard to get to this point, and it makes all those efforts feel worth it.
Well, a big part of that effort is learning how to draft at this level of competition. You said that this was something especially important to you. You realized that this was costing you results, right?
Yeah. My first ever, back when it was called the Pro Tour in Milwaukee, Battle for Zendika, I went 9-1 in constructed and like 3-3 in draft. And that was the best draft record I had for a few years at a PC. Like, it's really what held me back for a long time. And the last like year and a half, I've both been putting more time into it. I've also been treating it more like constructed. Just like trying to figure out like, these are the archetypes I like and how they interact with each other. And when you're drafting a deck, trying to like draft it so all the pieces synergize and mesh together like you would a constructed deck. And over time, it's just clicked. And I think I 5-1'd the limited portion of my last two of like this MC and the last PT, and just all my efforts are coming to fruition, and it feels so absurd.
It's been a thrill to watch. Talking to you Thursday, talking to you again, more conversations to come the rest of the way in the weekend. I remember after that first Pro Tour, we talked in my column. You were 9-1 in constructed. It's great to see you matching those results in limited and having it pay off so spectacularly this weekend. Autumn, congratulations on this great weekend.
Yeah, that's pretty wonderful stuff. Congratulations to Autumn Burchett. You will see them in the top 8 tomorrow of Mythic Championship Cleveland. Who else, though? That's the question. And so many stories bubbling up here. I want to mention Kellen Pastor, a tremendous achievement. Now, Kellen hasn't been in the feature match area this weekend, got to 4 losses pretty early, but has kept on winning and winning and winning and winning. And now, off camera again, gets to 11-4, and that's a dream for Callan, because that means the next rung on the ladder, and just a sort of, again, the validation you see for Autumn coming to the top 8 tomorrow. Callum won't be doing that, but Callum will be at the next event and the next one and the next one because of his achievements this weekend. And those kind of stories are happening all over the room behind us. It really is magic that matters. It's what makes it so special here at the Mythic Championship and wherever you are when you play the magic that really matters to you. So congrats to Autumn. So let's see what else is going on. Maria, you've been out on the floor trying to track down some of those stories, whether it's members of the MPL or just around the floor. So why don't we hear from Maria and then Maria and then Maria.
Hey there, I found Craig Wesco. Craig, how'd the tournament go for you this weekend?
I've had better tournaments for sure, but it's been fun.
But you're on a pretty good team. Team Good Luck High Five.
I am. And we have these really awesome sponsors as well.
Hey, thanks. Sick plug. So White Weenie, as you're known for White Weenie, and now that deck is really viable in the current standard format. That's got to be nice, right?
Yeah, there's kind of pros and cons. When you have the target on your back, it's like everyone's preparing for you. Whereas when you're kind of off the radar, sometimes people, don't really have all the hate cards for you and aren't building their decks to be good against you. So I haven't really fared well in this tournament, but it's been fun, like playing all these white creatures, and I got the city's blessing on turn 3 last round.
What? How?
Just like multiple legions landing, snubhorn sentries, like flipped the landing, played another sentry. Like it was pretty sweet.
Well, that's sweet enough for me for a whole tournament. Craig Wesco. I'm here with MPL member Eric Froelich. How'd the tournament go for you, Efro?
Oh, truly awful.
Truly awful has been called. What did you play?
I played Nexus of Fate.
What? That's a good deck. What happened?
Luck. No, I've won all my game 1, so I think that card should be banned in best of 1, something worth considering. But, man, I've really stumbled. My deck has basically fizzled on me a few times in the really good matchups. And the close matchups, I've won all of them. I mean, the real problem was I went 3-3 in draft, and so I was 5-2 in constructed, now 5-4 after winning game 1s and losing game 2s and 3s. Not even to sideboard cards, just to the deck fizzling.
So you're a member of the MPL. You've started streaming. I caught your stream the other day. How do you like it?
I love streaming. I like playing Magic. I like talking to people, and someone decided that combining them was a good idea, and I approve.
All right. Will you wave hi to your dogs at home?
Hi, dogs, and Athena.
I'm here with MPL member and world champion Javier Dominguez. How's your tournament going?
Well, I'm 8-6 now. No, 9-6. So I think it's pretty good. Like I started 1-2, so I'm pretty happy. Yeah.
So what's your life been like since you've been crowned world champion?
Well, it still doesn't get old. It's just like sometimes I don't remember about that. I just think, wow, I made it. So yeah, also all the MPL, being world champion, all these changes, I still haven't like really thought like slowly about that, but just like super happy about everything that's happening now.
And you're streaming now. How's that been going?
Well, this is like kind of unexpected to me, but I'm really enjoying it. Like it really feels like just being there with friends and chatting with people. So I'm very happy with streaming. The first days, I was concerned about not being able to stream for some hours, but now I'm kind of used to it and I'm definitely enjoying it. You should go check it out.
Yeah, check it out. World champion, no big deal. Javier Dominguez. Hey everybody, welcome back to the news desk, joined by Simon Gertzen here. Simon, it's getting really exciting right now. Top 8 on the horizon. How do you feel?
Yeah, and there's a lot of matches that are still to be played. Not a lot of people that can say they are securely into top 8. I'm excited.
All right, so why don't we head down to the floor? Someone who is really sweating on the outcome of what pairings look like for the last round is with Brian David Marshall.
Brian David Marshall here with Magic the Gathering Hall of Famer Luis Scott Vargas. Luis, you've got a little army of Channel Fireball people sort of keeping potential high fivers away from you, keeping them at a safe distance. You're 12-3. Seems like a great spot to be in. Tell me what's going on here.
Yeah, 12-3 is obviously where you want to be at the Pro Tour. 12-3-1 is the most common record when you top 8. But looking at the tiebreakers, I have the worst of them. So there's a chance I get paired against someone who can't draw, in which case I'll have to play for it. So I'm basically not celebrating yet. Like, this isn't me trying to play it cool. It's me thinking, like, man, there's a good chance I got to play for it. So I'm still kind of in the game mode.
I mean, I think back to the first time I saw you at a Pro Tour, which was Pro Tour London. That was an event where you were playing in that last round. And that was pretty early on in your career, right?
It was. That was my second Pro Tour, third Pro Tour. And I was playing actually in the exact same position where I could draw. In fact, my opponent would make top 8 with the draw, but I wouldn't. So I played for it and unfortunately didn't win.
Now, assuming you get there, you get the draw, you get the win, that's a big number. If you make a top 8, 10 Mythic Championships, top 8s is just kind of, I mean, it's gaudy, but it also puts you in a tier by yourself there, right?
Yeah, it's Apollo -2 is kind of how I would be thinking of it. I would be really happy to have that happen. Obviously, like it would mean a lot to me. Like, it's the sort of thing where people might think like once you hit a certain number, you stop caring, or you care less, or you're in the Hall of Fame, you're not as motivated. I care about every single one. Every single one. Like I still care about proving like how good I am. I still care about the results, and there is some satisfaction when I do well.
Now, how much did Guilds of Ravnica stay with you? I know you were disappointed, especially when we found out that we were going to be calling these things Mythic Championships. You said I had a chance to win the last Pro Tour.
Right.
How much have you thought about that event?
Basically none. One of the best things about Magic is you learn to lose, and you lose a lot. Every single person who you've ever interviewed on camera has lost thousands of matches of Magic because that's just what it takes to get to this point. So the fact that I lost the last Pro Tour in the finals, mulling to 4, people always ask me like, does that stick with you? How much does it matter? Look, they changed the mulligan rule because of it, and I'm just like, yeah, I mean, it happened. Like, it doesn't particularly bother me. I wish I won. That would have been great. But I'm not that worried about it. Like, I just came here to play in the Pro Tour. Though maybe you could say it did weigh on me because we chose not to put any Ravnica Allegiance cards into our constructed deck. So we're just trying to run back guilds here.
Now, on the flip side of that, you go again these back-to-back Mythic Championship events, and you just put up this kind of sustained excellence through 16 rounds of a tournament. That's just got to feel amazing. You talk about that urge to prove yourself, and I mean, what does that say to be able to still do that after playing for so long?
Yeah, I am old. You're right. I
can't accuse anyone in this room of being old.
That's true. It might sound trite, but I am competing against myself. Like, I care how well I play intrinsically, and I made a couple mistakes this tournament, but that's going to happen. It's unrealistic to never make any, and I feel very good about my level of play. And obviously, I care about the results too, because you can play perfectly and go 0-5 and still feel pretty bad. But it does feel good to think like, yeah, I'm playing at a good level. I like how well I'm playing. I might not be playing 60 hours a week anymore, but I actually am playing more. I played a lot for this tournament. I ran our team's limited meeting because I was one of the people who had drafted the most. So I feel like I'm playing to a level which I'm really happy with.
Now you're playing this blue-red deck. Yeah. You chose to play it obviously because it has some good matchups. What's something people? There's a lot of people rooting for you at home, and they sit down, they see if you end up playing next round in the feature match area. What's something when they look at the archetypes? What's something to be scared of? What's something for them to be kind of excited about?
The worst by far is Nexus. If I play against any Wilderness Reclamation Nexus deck, it's very difficult for us to win. Don't have a fast clock, don't have much disruption. The best is Mono Blue. I've beaten it 3 times so far this tournament. That's our best matchup of the commonly played decks. Though Mono White, I think, is still favorable as well. Then Sultai has a coin flip like it is with basically every deck in the tournament.
Seems like Sultai is always a coin flip.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what those decks do, right?
All right, Luis, I'm going to let you get back to your army of protectors, your wall of shield there. and see what happens. We got one more round to go here at the Mythic Championship in Cleveland.
All right, so as we settle in towards the last round of Swiss, what we're going to do is do a little time capsule moment. It turns out that over the last 8 to 10 Pro Tours, if you look at the standings after round 14 with 2 rounds to go, there are either 14 or 15 people who have a record of 10 wins, 3 losses and a draw or better. It also turns out that that represents most of the time either 7 or all 8 of the ultimate top 8. So what we're going to do, we took a look at the standings at the end of round 14, and we're going to go from the top down and introduce you to essentially the meta game that matters. These are the decks that you will see tomorrow because, yes, someone might sneak in at 12-4 from 35th place, having lost their 4th round a few rounds ago. But fundamentally, this is the shape of tomorrow. So why don't we start with Marcio Carvalho. Now, Marcio Carvalho is in, we know, into the top 8, currently 13-1-1. This is his 6th top 8. Phenomenal achievement, second in the Player of the Year race, 2016-17. Here's his deck, Maria, and what's going on here.
All right, Azorius aggro for Marcio, and this is really interesting here, and you might notice something a little confusing in that there's no blue cards in the main deck, Simon.
Yes, Maria, we actually had this discussion whether to actually call that Azorius aggro because there are no blue cards in the main deck. The Hallowed Fountains and Glacial Fortresses are there for negates, for those Deputy of Detentions from the sideboard, but I want to talk about the main deck. This is such a streamlined aggro deck. Look at the amount of 4-offs.
4 up.
And you hit with Legion's Landing, with History of Benalia. You have the new card Tithe Taker, which doesn't look like the best beatdown card, but it's just so difficult to handle and makes it more importantly difficult for your opponent to interact with you on your turn so that you can plan those attacks which are crucial for the deck. And of course, Convoke, a super important mechanic.
And you know, there's no Deputy of Detention here in the main deck, which is something people had been experimenting with adding to the white deck. Why do you think that's not in here?
I think you just want it in certain matchups, so it's easier to be straightforward, linear, and especially at a Mythic Championship where you don't know what metagame to expect, I like this choice of going very streamlined for game 1.
So at the end of round 14, Autumn Birchett was in second place on 12-2, and then was able to intentionally draw, claim 1 point, in fact with Marcio Carvalho, in round 15, which means we know that Autumn Birchett is indeed into the top 8. So 2 are known. Maria, what is Autumn playing?
All right, so this is mono blue tempo, but it's not the mono blue tempo that everybody had been playing, Simon. I talked to Autumn and they said, you know what, I wanted to play a really tempo-oriented version of this deck, not necessarily an aggressive one.
Yes, and of course, I mean, it's still the mono blue tempo that people have been playing, but particular card choices are what make the difference here, and we're talking about 3-4 different slots. I think the most important thing to realize is that Mistcloak Herald has been getting lower and lower in people's evaluation. Autumn chose to play only 1, which made room for Entrancing Melody and Essence Captures in the main deck, really playing a much longer game potentially.
And this is not an easy deck to play by any stretch of the imagination, right?
I find it one of the hardest decks in Standard. I tried it as well. It was one of the first ones I had on Arena and tried out, but if you just misstep a single turn, suddenly you look at your hand and you feel like you can never win. So I have a lot of respect for Autumn, but also all the other mono blue players out there.
So 1 and 2, they intentionally drew with each other, Marcio Carvalho and Autumn Birchett. Reid Duke was in 3rd place coming into round 15. He couldn't intentionally draw because he was paired down against someone who needed to beat him and advance towards the top 8. But Reid won in round 15, which means we know the 3rd member of the top 8 is Reid Duke. And this is his 4th Mythic Championship, 3 Pro Tours, and now the 1st Mythic Championship here in Cleveland. 4th MC top 8, if you will. He is part of the reigning team champions, Team Ultimate Guard. Maria, what is he playing?
All right, well, Reid Duke also made the mono blue tempo call as the strongest deck. And, you know, there's a Sultai deck out there. So you're like, oh, well, isn't Reid playing that? Of course, he loves forests, he loves swamps. No, mono blue tempo made the commitment. And there you can see 3 Mistcloak Heralds in this version, Simon.
Absolutely. This is actually more of a classic build of the deck. Reid and his team decided that Charter Course was kind of the weakest link in what you're trying to do. And of course, you always want to maximize the draws where you go one drop into Curious Obsession, and Mistlock Herald is still an important part of that game plan.
Some people say, if you don't have your Tempest Djinn in these mono blue matchups, you just lose. Do you think that's true?
I think most people say if you don't have Curious Obsession, you lose. So actually, it's a little bit of both, but I've seen plenty of games without Obsession or without the Djinn still going towards the mono blue deck.
So coming into this round, fourth place was Yuki Ichikawa. Now, at this point, we're in the realm of players who may want to draw in the next round, may have to play and win in the next round, might even lose in the next round, but still make it in. But if he were to make it in, Yuki Ichikawa, he's been there before, 4 Grand Prix titles, just a terrific performance by him. Yoshihiko Ikawa, begging your pardon, and just a terrific player. Best of 24 Pro Tour starts was 7th in San Diego in 2010. 4 top 8s at the Grand Prix level. What is Yoshihiko Ikawa playing?
All right, for you control lovers out there, there it is, Esper Control. 3 copies of Kaya's Wrath, suite of cast downs, absorbs, everything that you would expect. Is this a great control deck, Simon?
It's a good control deck, I would say. It's a solid control deck. It has some weaknesses. You're playing an island that doesn't cast Kaya's Wrath. You're playing Cry of the Canarium. That is a dead card in certain matchups. And you really have to have things go your way. It's always a little bit unfortunate that you have to play this one win condition apart from Teferi to be able to beat Nexus of Fate. In this list, it's Karn, Sign of Urza, but it's still a great deck.
Do you think it's well positioned with the meta? We've got so many aggressive decks floating around out there.
It would be good against a sea of aggressive decks, but I think it's not good enough against the tempo decks, which is a very different animal. Mono blue is not what you want to face.
And Teferi, Teferi's been an all-star since the moment it was printed. Do you think Teferi's kind of taken a back seat, or will Esper Control push through and shine?
I mean, Teferi is still an absurdly powerful Magic card, and he will be there for us, I'm sure.
So I'm starting to head towards pairings for the next round. Luis Scott Vargas indicated in his interview with Brian there that he felt because of tie breaks, he may well have to play. First pass at this suggests that may well be right because Yuya Hosokawa of Japan is on 34 points, 11, 3, and 1. So if he were to play and win in his last round, he would get to 12, 3, and 1, which would put him on 37. And players on 36 intentionally drawing to 37 would then be in the tiebreak mix. And Luis thinks his tiebreaks are not very good, so we may well see Luis Scott Vargas play. That's just a preliminary take on that. But as we head down the standings coming into the round we've just watched, Joe So of Malaysia was up next. Now, he is one of Malaysia's finest players, indeed his brother. Terry So is an invitational with him from 2007. And Joe has 3 Grand Prix top 8s, including a title. This is his 14th Mythic Championship start. So here's his deck. It's Mardu Aggro, Maria.
So I absolutely love this deck, Rich. I'm so happy somebody brought a deck that's kind of synergistic here. We've got Legion Lieutenant in this deck, Vampires Matter, and you've got to love Judith, the Scourge Diva. What do you think about it, Simon?
This is not Mardu aggro. This is actually Vampire aggro. I've never seen this deck before. And for that deck to be in contention for top 8 out of left field is just fascinating to me. Cards like Dust Legion Zealot and Vicious Conquistador. Unbelievable.
I know.
Listen to the two of you.
I saw it over there in the feature match area. I was like, wait a second. I did the thing where you rub your eyes and you're like, wee, wee, wee. Yes, that is a Vicious Conquistador.
You do what?
Wee, 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 wee.
Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to make sure people had an extra 3 seconds ready to clip it. Good stuff. All right. I tell you who it feels like. It feels like a Ken Yukihiro deck.
Yeah.
No.
He just turns up and goes, yeah, never mind this established format. None of these 6 excite me. I'm going to play this.
Which he did this weekend as well, just not as successful.
Okay, fair enough. Now, somewhat lost in the shuffle, remember how we had Michael Bonder as one of 2 8-0 players coming into today? And then we kind of lost track of him as the day progressed. Well, looks to me he's going to be at table 2 against Yoshihiko Okawa on 36 points. So there's a very good chance he may be able to ID again, because Luis thinks his tiebreaks aren't very good. Bonder's, of course, are amazing because he's been right up at the top. Michael Bonder from Denmark, if you don't know him, Team Snapcaster ex-MTG Mint Card, 4 Grand Prix top 8s, a Grand Prix champion from Lyon in 2017. And as we've been saying throughout, incredibly positive guy. A lot of people rooting for him, not just in Denmark. So, what's he up to, Maria?
All right, well, he brought a deck that was on a lot of people's radar coming into this tournament, Simic Nexus. Now, we've played around with Bant Nexus, lots of different builds. Finally landing on this is kind of the consensus best Nexus deck, Simon.
Yes, and I plead guilty. It's also my favorite deck. You just do what you always do, Growth Spiral into Wilderness Reclamation, and then it becomes incredibly easy to cast those Nexus of Fates. And what you want is to flip Search for Azcanta, because then you're just never going to run out of turns.
Yeah, some people say, you know, sometimes it's a little painful as you kind of wait for your opponent to take all the turns and finally resolve a threat. But the honest answer is, at some point, it's kind of it is inevitable.
And they're always allowed to concede, right?
Great point, great point.
Okay, so next up on the standings coming into this round, now at 11-4, which means that really needing a lot of things to go his way, is Peter Ye, Chicheng Ye. Team MTG Sheep, part of the Team Grand Prix champions from Indianapolis in 2018. This is by far the best of his Mythic Championship starts, 10-6 at Guilds of Ravnica, previous best. So on an upward trajectory for the man from Singapore. What did he bring?
All right. Same song, mono blue tempo. Let's take a look at the exact build that Peter brought to the tournament. And something I want to talk about here, Simon, is Entrancing Melody and how important that is to this deck. We're seeing them come across like 1-ofs, 2-ofs in the main.
Yep, that's the song that Mono Blue Tempo likes to sing.
Nice.
Hydroid Krasis has converted mana cost 2 when it's on the battlefield. And that's what you really want to snatch with Entrancing Melody. But the way the format shapes up, even in the mirror match, it's not bad to have one already in the main deck.
I can tell you that our next player is in for a very interesting few minutes indeed. It's Julien Berthaud of France. Now, Berthaud is on Team Baguette, had only like 40% match wins from his first couple of Mythic Championship starts, then a very, very good finish earlier in 2018 at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan in Bilbao. Now it's his 7th start here, 50% win rate. So obviously, best ever. Now, the way it's worked for him, he won last round, so he is now on 36 points, 12-3. So he would love to find someone to intentionally draw with. He's been paired against Marcio Carvalho, who's way in clear on 40 points. So Marcio can put his feet up, could concede, could intentionally draw, or could decide to play, leave Berthaud on 36 points by beating him, and potentially knock Julien Berthaud out of the top 8. Simon, for the first time at this championship, let's talk about the importance of being a number 1 seed or indeed a higher seed in the top 8.
Good point, Rich. If you are the top seed at this event, you get to play on Sunday, play first on Sunday, no matter what. And if you remember that Marcio Carvalho is on Azorius aggro, it's huge to be on the play. So we're not talking about tiny edges, we're really talking about a massive chunk of opportunity that Marcio might be fighting for here in this final round.
Let's take a look at the deck that he is indeed playing.
Mono blue tempo once again.
So it's same song, different tempo, or same song, same tempo?
Yeah, same song, same tempo, or just
same
about
same
here.
song, different melody.
Entrancing.
There you go.
Very good.
So Terramander is, you know, a new addition to this deck that it got recently. How much has this changed the deck, Simon?
I think it has improved it tremendously because suddenly you have an additional 4 1-drops that are just as scary as the other ones, honestly. And as long as you don't put a +1/+1 counter on it with Essence Capture, it will always grow to be a 5/5 if the game goes long enough.
I want to talk about Curious Obsession just really quick. The first time you saw it, did you ever think it would end up in Standard?
No, absolutely not. I was actually surprised when Joel Larson told me that their team had it super high in their limited ranking because I thought it's decent, but it doesn't seem that great. It just snowballs out of control.
Yeah.
So next up is Andrea Mengucci. He's back in the cross your fingers bracket at 11-4. We'll take a very quick look at his deck, Maria. It's Sultai mid-range.
All right, so this was the most popular deck here this weekend. Simon, do you think those people made the right call?
This is the first Sultai mid-range deck we're seeing,
yes.
Right? That's actually a little bit surprising. Over 20% of the field on day 1, on day 2. I don't want to call it the right call, but it can never be the wrong call to bring Sultai mid-range to a Standard tournament these days.
Just super solid deck.
Absolutely.
So now we get to another person who's in a super interesting spot. This is Alex Majlaton. He's on 12-3. Team Dice City Games, his local store, got a ton of GP top 8s, best of second when at Grand Prix Charleston in 2005, but only 51% at Pro Tour level from 33 starts. But now would love to intentionally draw into the top 8. He is paired against Louis Scott Vargas on 36 points, who thinks he probably can't intentionally draw. And it looks to me like we may have a different weapon of choice, Maria.
That's right. Mono red. Hello, Alex Majlaton. Mono red. But wait, there's green in there. That's right. Once again, for sideboard cards, which he told me makes all the difference here, Simon.
I would guess that Cinder Vines is one of these cards.
That's
I
right.
don't know his list, of course, but that's a card that Mono Red doesn't have access to, which means all these enchantments, all these wilderness reclamations are just so difficult to deal with. Majlaton actually going for an archetype that was on everybody's radar, but they really fell short in the metagame.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
I think it has to do a little bit with how the format shapes up, in the sense that the decks that are weak to mono blue, like Esper, they are also kind of crushing mono red and pushing it out of the metagame almost. These absorbs and these restless contents are, these Hydroid Crazies are just difficult to play against.
In case you're wondering, Collision Colossus is the other card that he's splashing for in there out of the sideboard.
Crazies? Have we decided that's,
Yeah,
that's the Latinate plural?
Probably Greek, Rich, but we thought it's like crisis, so that was our argument.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Okay, next, Paul Reitzel of the United States, a Hall of Famer, of course, again, part of the world champions that from Team Ultimate Guard. Maria, here's his deck, and this is pretty nice.
Yeah, so Azorius aggro yet again, but look, there they are. There's 3 copies of Deputy of Detention, so he made the choice to bring him, Simon.
Yeah, but he's on Team Ultimate Guard. So he's one of the 2 players that didn't play Mono Blue aggro. Actually, a little bit surprised. I mean, he's doing tremendously well. He's Paul Reitzel. He loves those white aggro decks. But still, I was expecting them to all show up with Mono Blue, actually.
And, you know, he's not a member of the MPL, but a lot of his friends are here at this tournament, and he kept, you know, I was going and interviewing them. He's like, whoa, do you want to talk to somebody from the MPL, or do you want to talk to a challenger?
Okay, that must have been pretty challenging for you, I would imagine. Daniel Gräfensteiner is next. Now, he's a Team Grand Prix champion, but he is also running out of rounds because he's on 11-4, and it looks to me like he's quite a reasonable way down the list. Looking at this, he's going to play against Shuta Kuribara of Japan again, and another someone who hasn't been at the top of the standings. That affects your tie breaks, realistically. So let's see what Daniel Gräfensteiner is bringing in case 12-4 is enough.
All right, there it is, Esper Control. This is the second time we've seen this on our list of these top decks here. And Kaya, did you expect to see Kaya in this tournament at all, Simon?
Yes, I did. I have actually played Kaya myself. You can -1 against a lot of the aggro decks, and you need that 1 win condition against Nexus of Fate, so Kaya it is.
Well, we haven't quite got through every single permutation of the top 8, but for that, we could just, like, you know, play round 16. So why don't we do that right now in the company of our stellar commentary team. Enjoy.